Hello again. One complaint often levelled against me and this channel by critics is that I keep going on about skin colour. Why can't I simply forget about the subject? The answer to this is, of course, that I talk about it a lot because the subject crops up increasingly every time I open my newspaper or listen to the news on the wireless. To give one instance of this awful modern trend, an archdeacon in the Church of England, the Venerable Dr. Miranda Threlfall Holmes, tweeted the other day that she had attended a conference on whiteness, and she used the tweet to call for more anti-whiteness. She is herself white. Now, on the face of it, this sounds odd, but it makes more sense when you realise that the concept of whiteness and white privilege is an offshoot of critical race theory, and that it underpins an awful lot of what we are seeing today in the Anglican Church, in academic institutions such as universities, in government departments, and also commercial companies such as banks and big businesses. In other words, to understand a lot of the weird stuff going on at the moment in this country, you really do need to know something about the concept of whiteness as it's applied in so many different ways. Should I simply shrug and ignore all this? Is it racist to notice what is happening and ask questions about it, or to attempt to explain to other people what's going on? Personally, I don't think so. Whenever I see something very strange happening, I like to find out about it. And when, as in this case, it's something which directly concerns me, then I cannot for the life of me see why I should keep my mouth shut and not mention what I see, just in case it upsets somebody. After all, I am myself white, and I am also a great fan of European and American civilization and culture, which ties into this. Whiteness does not simply refer to skin colour. It is meant to embrace Western culture in general and is a state of mind rather than being a purely physical characteristic. In other words, being white has implications for other people. In the description to this video, I give a link to the Wikipedia article on whiteness, and I strongly recommend struggling through that if people want to know what's going on in Britain and America today. Before going any further, I have to say that I'm always a bit suspicious of any ideology, cult, religion or philosophical system which has to invent new words to explain what it is all about. And from this point of view alone, I find that the whiteness branch of critical race theory falls down badly from the very start. In the Wikipedia article, to which I give a link, we read that an otherization of minorities can occur with whiteness as a default, where whiteness theory identifies whiteness as invisible to those who possess it, resulting in both intended and unintended otherization. Otherization. There's a wonderfully new and needless word, and no mistake. In English, this sentence could easily be expressed by saying that those belonging to a country's majority culture tend to treat those who do not belong to it as outsiders. There. That makes it a little easier to follow, doesn't it, without all that talk of unintended otherization. I could, if I had the time, translate the whole of the Wikipedia article in that way into English, but I really can't face it at the moment. At the heart of this strange belief system is a sensible suggestion that nations belonging to a particular ethnicity have a habit of looking askance at those whom they view as outsiders, and that they don't always realise when they are doing this. In other words, white Europeans and Americans have a bunch of ideas about everything from arranging to get to meetings on time to judging beliefs against certain objective criteria. And we expect immigrants from other cultures to go along with our way of doing things when they move to our countries. Now, I happen to think that that's a good thing, because the values of Western Europe and North America are those of the Enlightenment. We require, to give one example, evidence for a belief in something, and we can usually arrive at the truth of a proposition by applying logic and discussing things rationally, rather than relying upon divine revelation or instinctive feelings or dreams and prophecies. Those familiar with critical race theory will remember the idea of storytelling and lived experience, which in some cultures are held to be just as sound a basis for belief as evidence and reason. This is one way that whiteness certainly permeates our society, and we hardly ever notice it. If somebody tells us something, we feel it quite sensible to ask, why do you believe this to be true? Or, in other words, to require evidence for claims. This is whiteness at work. Something which is missed out, though, is that all nationalities and cultures operate in a similar fashion, preferring their own ways of doing things and regarding foreign ideas with some suspicion, preferring to stick to their own tried and tested ways. In India, the Indian way of living and working is regarded as a norm, and Hindu culture and ideas underpin much of what goes on. In an Arab country, it will be Islam and Arab traditions which are the yardstick, and they will not welcome intruders who try to seduce their young people from time-honoured traditions. This is not a question merely of nationality. Arabness, Pan-Arabism, is common, say, to countries like as far part of Morocco and Egypt and Syria. In other words, to focus simply on whiteness, which is to say the traditions and thought processes of people of European heritage, and to portray them as being in some way uniquely awful and undesirable, is not really a sensible point of view. In sub-Saharan Africa, there are many cultures and ethnic groups. In Nigeria, there are Hausas in the north who are by and large Muslim, and Yoruba and Igbo in the south who are often Christian. They speak different languages and have different identities, but all share blackness in common with all other people living in south of the Sahara there. Blackness in Africa is every bit as much a thing as whiteness is in Europe. There's a good deal more to say on this subject, especially when it comes to the idea of white privilege, but I've given a brief outline of the whiteness debate. Would it be better for me not to do so? To take no notice when I see the Church of England mixing itself up in this affair? Is it really an indication of racial prejudice on my part, or an obsessive nature, to take an item of this kind from the news and explain to many people what it is all about, especially when it's a concept which underpins quite a few of the things which they're likely to see happening in the modern world in Britain and America? I don't think so, really.